break down the cholestasis. So stop the bile being blocked. So that's step one. Step two, get the bile moving. So getting flowing out of the liver and gallbladder into the digestive tract so it can then go out. And then number three, binding the bile and the toxicity to stop it being reabsorbed. And those three steps that I just said together constitute the difference between you being very successful at detox and making rapid progress, or you making no progress, or maybe even thinking you're making progress, but making yourself worse so that you end up, like I did a few years ago, having a health crisis because you thought you had sorted everything out and all you actually did, well, maybe you've done some great stuff, but one of the things you did is you've created cholestasis in yourself, which then meant that the toxins were just building up more and more and more until the dam breaks.
Welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Hawks, and I'm here with my co-host, Elwin Robinson. And today we are talking detoxification. So Elwin, I know we've been doing a lot in the lead up to this, and I'm really excited for this episode. So please talk to me about detoxification and why it's so important that we're discussing it today.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that is, thank you, Chrissy. I think it's something that's commonly very misunderstood. A lot of people in the mainstream think that detoxification is not real, or it's something that the body just takes care of, and so if you say you're detoxing, it's nonsense. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, there's a lot of people in the alternative health community, natural health community, whatever you want to call it, who I would say the things they're doing are not really supporting with detoxification, and sometimes it's actually making them worse. And so those are more the people I really want to speak to. I'm going to give you some arguments to tell your mainstream friends, parents, whatever, about, detoxification, that it is a real thing. But I do acknowledge that, there's so many people who I've met in the community of people who are trying to be healthy through, not purely mainstream methods, who have been detoxing for years, often decades, and they seem to always be, intermittently at least trying to detoxify, and it seems like it's something that shouldn't last a lifestyle. The other thing, of course, is a lot of time people, they feel worse when they're doing what they think is detoxification, which may be. And so we need to address, why that is. And if it's a sign that, your body is detoxing, as people love to say, or if it's actually a sign that you're getting worse. And to be honest, I'm not going to tell you it's one or the other. It could be either, but I'm going to help you delineate which one it is. So I'd say my main goal of doing this episode is to help teach you, Chrissy, and the viewers, listeners, 3 new terms, or terms that I think may be new to you, which when you understand them, it explains how detoxification actually works, why it often doesn't seem to be working, what you can do to actually start to get better, and just to actually understand the whole process, basically. And those 3 terms are, so toxic bile theory is 1, cholestasis is number 2, and intrahepatic circulation would be number 3. And so once you understand those and the issues that there are with those particular things happening inside your body, you'll be a lot more quick to deal with it. Plus, it's not just going to be theory. What I want to do as well is equip you with just one technique, which, if you do it, will make a massive difference in the detoxification that you may be going through, or even if you've never detoxified, never tried to, just interested in health in general, maybe you watched our cardiovascular health episode and we're planning to do this one next or whatever. Like, one thing that you can do that is so incredibly beneficial that will help to support your body to detoxify. I would say I would put this on a par with, like, it's almost as beneficial, and in some cases even more beneficial than cutting the toxic stuff out of your life, which we'll talk about that as well. But it's so important to support your body in this way, and it's very effective, and it's very safe, and it's actually really cheap as well. So that's a little teaser to hopefully keep you watching. We'll go through that by the end of the episode. But if I just tell you what it is and you don't understand the three terms I just said earlier, it won't mean as much. You really have to understand how detox works and how it goes wrong to understand why that recommendation is so beneficial.
I'm really looking forward to this education. Thank you, Elwin. Because I mean, there is that big thing of detoxification and, oh, I'm on a cleanse, or I'm on this, I'm on that. But I think, especially in my case, my understanding of the process and what the body does and what its needs are to help that system, because I may be doing it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that my body can handle it. So this is going to be a great education, not only for me, but I think as well for everyone who's joining us today. So which leads me into this next question, which is, can you please explain what is the purpose of detoxification as it comes from our body?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would say there's when people talk about, so first of all, I can answer what is detoxification, what is a toxin, right? This is an important question. And this is one of the things that, by the way, mainstream people kind of ridicule, right? That when people say, oh, I'm detoxing, it's like, what are you detoxing? And a lot of people don't have an answer for that. Or they don't, well, toxins, what's that? I don't know. So that doesn't leave you on a very firm foundation to argue your case if you are debating with someone who doesn't believe in this kind of stuff. So let's dig into that a little bit. So what is toxin? I believe that the Greek or Latin, I can't remember, root for the word is the same as, it comes from the same term as arrow. So it's the idea of like something that's stabbing you or something that's piercing you. I would say that basically a toxin is a poison. That's basically it. Now, as Paracelsus, often credited as the father of modern medicine, said over 2,000 years ago, the difference between a medicine and a poison is dosage, right? And this is absolutely true. Almost any nutrient that is beneficial at a certain level will actually be damaging and often can kill you, right? So, too much water can absolutely kill you. Too much salt can absolutely kill you. So we got to be a little bit careful about throwing around that word poison. So I'm going to maybe, I don't know, talk about some things which I consider to be poison, maybe not in this episode, but maybe in future ones. And what I recommend for anyone listening is just, if you hear me call something a poison and you don't agree, just ask yourself, at what dose would it be a poison, right? So if you think alcohol is great, no big deal, fair enough, but you probably, how much alcohol would you consider poisonous, right? Would it be a shot? Would it be a pint glass full of spirits? Would it be a gallon? Right? At some level, it's a poison. It's just a question of dosage again, right? And so, when I refer to things as poisons, just realize that. So that's what toxification is. That's poisons going into the body in a nutshell. So what is detoxification? Detoxification, so there's two definitions for this. There's either, simply the opposite of what toxification is, so poisons leaving your body, right? And then the other definition of it would be poisons that are processed in your body. And I have to admit, when I used to teach detoxification and I had our course on it, and again, I felt good about it because I'd made a lot of progress. I helped a lot of people make a lot of progress. Overall, felt good about it. But in retrospect, I wish I'd have learned more earlier about the other part of it, which is the processing part of it, in the depths that I now understand it, which I'm, very excited to be able to share with you today. So in terms of the toxins leaving your body, the primary pathways are through the whole respiratory system, right? So you got the lungs, obviously, you got nose as well. You got mucus to some degree, but most of the toxins are leaving through breathing them out. And in fact, as I used to teach, if you measure toxicity just in terms of volume, then the majority of toxicity that leaves your body does so through your lungs. Now, if you measure it by concentration, as in what's the most toxic stuff doesn't tend to go out that way. And that's why people often don't focus on it as the primary detoxification organ. But you could say technically it is. A lot of it also goes out via the skin. And a lot of it also goes out through the bladder and the large intestine. So those are the four major ways that we excrete poisons. For women, also there is menstruation. They have that additional method, and all of us, we get a bit of poison out of our ears. I mean, there's a few other ones, but the four main ones that we usually talk about are those four. And so those are the excretion removal pathways. Now, there's also the processing centers. And so the main processing centers are, number one is the liver. And the liver is the most important one. And often when we talk about detoxification, people often think about the liver because the liver is the one that actually has to process the toxicity. Secondary to that, but also really important, is the kidneys. So before it can go out via the bladder, it needs to be processed by the kidneys. And before it can go out via the large intestine, generally anyway, with some exceptions, it needs to be processed by the liver in most cases. And so that's kind of detoxification in a nutshell. That's what we're actually, that's what we're doing. And so, there's also the lymph system, which we talked about it's actually technically part of the cardiovascular system as well, but usually it's kind of classified along with the detoxification system. So this is kind of like the body's sewage system. It's often described to lots of channels in the same way that your arteries or your veins are lots of channels. And there is actually filtration systems in there that do some processing. But when we're talking about processing, what we're mainly talking about, because even the kidneys are kind of, they're a processing center, I would say technically, but a lot of what they do is just filtration. And in fact, that's what they refer to as well. What the liver does, the magic that the liver does, and why it's so important, is because it, more than any other organ that we've talked about, transforms, and especially more importantly, the worst toxins, the most toxic, the most poisonous toxins, it will transform them into something that is less toxic for it to then be transported out of the body. Now, a challenge with that is a lot of the time, it has kind of intermediate metabolites, and often it will turn the toxic thing into something more toxic first before it eventually turns it into something that's safe. And so a lot of what it does is kind of, it processes and transforms elements through various chemical reactions, and then it also kind of tries its best to store them safely to get them out of the body.
Wonderful. I mean, I was going to ask, how does it work? So I think you've touched on a little bit. Can you go into a little bit more about the mechanisms of detoxification and the processes that the body does go through it?
Yes. So when it comes to the liver, let's carry on with that. So generally, stuff that you might have heard of when it comes to detoxification of the liver is that there's phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. So phase 1 is often like an oxidative step, although not necessarily. And then phase 2 is more of a conjugative step, although again, not necessarily. Phase 1 is often where the element is turned into something more toxic, and then phase 2 is often where the element is turned into something less toxic. There's a bunch of different systems in there. I'll reel off a few of them, but we'll probably go into more detail on these in a future episode when we talk about specific toxins. But there's glutathione, so that's the primary antioxidant in the body, although there's contenders for that these days that might be taking its crown, but for now it's still known as the primary antioxidant in the body. There's glucuronidation. There is acetylation. There is sulfation, there is methylation, there may be more, but that's what I remember off the top of my head. So these are all processes, like I talked about earlier, chemical processes where it's converted into something ultimately, hopefully, less benign, or more benign, or if not more benign, then at least it's been packaged in a form that it can now be more easily transported out of the body. So amino acid conjugation, I guess that's another one off the top of my head, like these things called metalloproteins that will, which are just, again, combinations of amino acids that your body will attach to specific heavy metals, again, to help them transport them out more easily. But there's actually a third phase to detoxification that most people don't know about, phase 3 detoxification. And so all the stuff I just said happens at quite a microscopic level. Like you would need literally a microscope to be able to see any of it, a very powerful one. On a macroscopic level, in other words, on a level that we could see if we had X-ray vision, there is the process of, because the thing about the liver that's very interesting and also very unfortunate is that it doesn't have a hole, meaning it doesn't have a way, it doesn't have like we talked about sewage system earlier. It doesn't have like an outlet pipe to push it straight out, right? So from the liver, once it's been processed by the liver, it then goes into the gallbladder. And the gallbladder is kind of like let's just say a storage device for a moment, and it prepares this toxicity to be released. Now, the thing that triggers the release of the toxicity is the consumption of food. And there's specific types of food. The specific thing that triggers the hormone called CCK is fat, sour foods, and bitter foods. And I'd say, fat and bitter especially, and fat especially. Probably fat, bitter, sour, probably in that order. Although, with all of them, it depends how much and how strong and all the rest of it. Now, I'm talking about toxicity so far, but here's the interesting thing. How does it transport it out? It doesn't, and it cannot just transport it out in the form of just in a pure form, because these poisons sometimes are so corrosive, so agitating, so irritating that they would literally burn. They would literally destroy any tissues that they touched. And so in order to get it out safely, your body binds it in this substance, which is a combination of cholesterol and a bunch of other stuff, which is with salts, minerals, amino acids, various other things, which is commonly referred to as bile. Now, this is interesting because most people haven't heard of bile, or they've heard of it but don't really know what it is. But those who have usually see it as a thing that helps you digest, which is true. That's the crazy thing. So in order to digest fat properly, especially, and also fat-soluble vitamins and some other substances, and because this bile stuff is so toxic, it also is a bit of a antiseptic. Like, it will clean the digestive tract that it will go through. And so a lack of bile is often a reason that is attributed to people getting SIBO or SIFO, which is an overgrowth of bacteria or yeast like Candida, fungus, in the small intestine where it shouldn't really be. The small intestine should have very low levels of organisms. It's the large intestine that should have organisms, but the small intestine, not much, not really. And so a lack of bile is often blamed for that. So that's a bit of a tricky thing to reconcile. It's like, well, what is it? Is it this essential fluid that my body makes in order to help me digest, crucial things like fat and, break them down into individual lipids so that my body can absorb them? Or is it this toxic waste disposal system? And the answer is yes. Like, it's both.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's both simultaneously, which is where a lot of the trickiness can come in. And so I guess what I've just introduced you to is the first of the three things that I talked about, which is the toxic bile theory, right? I think everyone knows what I just said is true. Like, anyone in the medical, scientific profession who knows biology, biochemistry, stuff like that. The only thing that's really at question is the degree of things, right? And so I think the mainstream would probably say, okay, it's got some highly toxic stuff in there, but it's not that toxic and it's no big deal. But it's there, right? Like if you ask them, okay, well, your body has all this toxicity coming in, correct? If you list it for them, okay, yes, technically, yes, right? And your liver does actually deal with that. Yes, correct. Okay, and it doesn't have an exit hole. No, it doesn't. And so it has to put them in the bile in order to transport them out of the body. Well, yes, it does. Like none of this is something that any, mainstream person would refute. The question is only how bad is it? And this is the thing that is a bit of contention. So my experience is that it's very bad. This is the pain issue that I had that I think I talked about in previous episodes. What it would basically feel like is, and this kind of, and ironically or weirdly, this started happening to me after I'd done a load of stuff to be healthy. This was not after a binge drinking session. This was not after a massive amount of stress. This was not after catching an infection. It wasn't any of that. This is when I was doing, things which I still believe, even with my current understanding, which has obviously changed, were things that were largely health promoting. I felt worse. And so I'll explain why that could happen in a minute. That'll be another term. But anyway, for whatever reason, no, I guess I have to explain that other term. Okay, so let's talk about the other thing that can go wrong. So this toxic bile is very toxic, right? So this bile is a fluid. We should be having something like 100 milliliters, 4 ounces, something like that released during a day at least. And so the way it should work is it builds up in your liver puts it into the gallbladder, which is like this little sac thing. And then when you eat fatty, sour, bitter foods, like I mentioned before, that triggers the gallbladder, and the gallbladder squeezes the bile into what's called the duodenum, which is the bit in between the stomach where the food gets stomach acids added to it and digested a little bit. Absorbed a little bit, digested, broken down, sanitized. And before it gets to the small intestine, which is the really long, thin tubing stuff. So in between them is the duodenum. And the duodenum is a place for the gallbladder to squirt its juices onto the food and the pancreas to also squirt its juices onto the food. So pancreas has enzymes and sodium bicarb, pancreatic fluid. And then the gallbladder has mainly this stuff, this bile stuff. So this bile gets released. Now, those of you who've kind of gone into the world of understanding how digestion goes wrong might well have come across this idea that a lot of the time we don't produce enough bile, or maybe more accurately, not enough bile is getting into the small intestine. And as I mentioned earlier, this can have a lot of knock-on effects. It can lead to essential fatty acid deficiency. It can lead to fat-soluble vitamin or other nutrient deficiencies, and it can lead to SIBO or SIFO issues in our small intestine. But so I kind of addressed that earlier. But what I didn't go into is why is that the case, right? Why is so little bile getting in? And so again, the more common theory in that I've come across is just that your body's not making enough. And that's certainly what is talked about when it comes to stomach acid. There's also this theory that I'm, to be honest, less convinced by. I think it's sometimes the case. I think it's more common than the mainstream says, but less common than the natural health people say, that a person doesn't have enough stomach acid. I think it does happen more than doctors realize, but maybe less than nutritionists think. So there is that thing where we're not making enough stomach acid. But with the bile, it's not really that we're not making enough, or it kind of is, but what it is really more than not making enough is that it's stuck. And so that's that second term, cholestasis. So chola relates to the gallbladder because it's it's more stuck in the gallbladder specifically, though it's also stuck secondarily in the liver, because of course when you have a system with a tube, wherever there's a blockage, the blockage will then continue upstream from the blockage as well, if that makes sense. So that's cholestasis. And so cholestasis is a thing that the medical profession recognizes. It is a term from their world. Again, they only look at it usually when it's more serious. And so there's two things that can cause that blockage. The first of them, the medical profession is fully aware of and pays attention to. The second, they are also aware of, but they don't really pay attention to it. So the first one is stones. So you might have heard the term gallstones. And yeah, if they get bad, they might put you on medication, which is just basically bile salts to help to try and dissolve that stuck bile, the cholestasis, which we'll talk more about, if that's the issue. But a lot of the time, they'll just try and remove the gallbladder.
Yes, but it's an essential organ, correct? I mean, we do need it.
It depends on your definition of essential.
Right.
If you mean to live, no, it's not essential.
Right.
If you mean to have optimal health, yeah, you could make the argument, yes, it is essential. But that's always the difference between definitions between the mainstream and the alternative, right?
Very
the
true.
Alternative, we tend to think more of what's optimum. The mainstream, they tend to think more about, will you stay alive? Will you be able to function? So you can function without one, but will it create issues downstream that you do not have bile being released appropriately when you eat meals? You're just having it trickle out all the time, whether you've eaten anything or consumed anything or not. Yes, it definitely can cause issues like the ones that we talked about earlier, specifically the nutritional deficiencies. That's why some people supplement with bile. This, I'm not sure it's the best thing to do, but it probably is if you're in that position. If you've had your gallbladder removed, I would tend to recommend that. So the first thing that can block it is those gallstones. Now, these tend to be rock hard calcium crystals. These are the same things that build up in the kidneys, forming kidney stones, which tend to be more well known. And it's calcium oxalate, generally. Calcium oxalate stones or just crystals, which the crystals eventually form into stones. Calcium is obviously this very hard mineral. Hard, dry mineral. And then oxalate are these very sharp crystals, which are found in a lot of plant foods, some of them in very high levels, that your body's, it's just yet another thing your body's got to deal with, but it can, as long as it's not already completely overwhelmed, which we'll talk about. And your body also makes oxalate in some cases. So that's the one that the medical profession tends to focus on. That's the one that can kill you, because while your gallbladder may not be technically essential to stay alive, if it becomes blocked and infected, it definitely can kill you. So that's why they prefer to remove it. But I think the other reason that they like to focus on it is because it's easier to see. Because it's calcium, it will show up very easily in an X-ray or MRI, anything, right? Because it's these hard things. Now, there's the other thing is the biliary sludge. So biliary, just bile, right? So the bile sludge. They call it sludge. Now, this is confusing. In the alternative health community, they often refer to it as stones still. They refer to them as like green stones. And for those of you who've done or heard a liver flush, which maybe quite a few of you, given the topic of this particular episode, they often talk about getting stones out, right? And often when people show photos and stuff, they look like little green peas. So just know that from a medical point of view, that's not a stone. That's what they call sludge. But whatever you call it, and some people say it's not real at all, it's just made by the process of flushing, it's just made from olive oil. To which I say, okay, but olive oil isn't like a green pea, right? It's obviously been blended with something to create that. And the thing it's been blended with is bile, to go back to that point. So again, we talked about cholestasis. The bile is stuck. It's not flowing, right? So one of the problems with that we talked about can affect your digestion. Another problem could cause SIBO, issues like that. Okay. But there's actually and those are the ones that are more commonly talked about because digestion is such a big deal. But there's actually a much worse problem that can be caused by cholestasis, which isn't really talked about. And that's the one that I want to focus on here. So it could be not flowing because of, hard rocks basically in the way. That's the calcium thing. But way more common than that is that it's just become too thick to flow, right? If you imagine like a milk that if you leave it in the fridge long enough, it kind of turns to yogurt, right? Like at a certain point, it becomes too thick to move. And so that is what's going on with the bile. Now, why does that happen? I mean, the answer to that is very complicated, but I would say a simple one that we can look at is the level of cholesterol in the particular recipe that makes bile. So there's always some cholesterol in bile, but cholesterol seems to be one of the body's favorite ways to encapsulate, hold, and maintain at least some, specifically fat soluble, but actually a lot of the worst toxins are fat soluble toxins. Right, so a lot of the worst poisons are either fat soluble or they're both water and fat, but they tend to be fat soluble, and the body tends to like to put them in the fat. Also, water soluble toxins tend to get flushed out of the body a lot more quickly. It's the fat soluble ones that generally tend to be the problem. Your body doesn't want it to be put into your fat cells where you actually need them, so it will try and put them into this cholesterol storage area. Now, if you did watch the cardiovascular episode, this might be ringing some bells. Oh, is this what's going on in my arteries as well? Yes, probably, as we talked about previously. And this might explain why there's lots of evidence saying that actually having fairly high blood markers for cholesterol often predicts better outcomes, health outcomes, than having low levels of cholesterol. That doesn't really make sense on one level, and it doesn't even make sense to me on one level, because the elevated cholesterol is a sign of a problem. So why would elevated cholesterol lead to a longer life? But of course, the answer is the alternative. It depends on what the cause is. If the alternative to high cholesterol is low cholesterol and high toxicity, and so your body doesn't have as much capacity to store the toxicity, that it's going to be more damage to well, first of all, the circulatory system, the walls, the arteries and the veins and all the rest of it, but also every cell and every organ, every gland and every system that the circulation gets to, which is pretty much all of them, right? So it's just going to damage everything. And so that's, I think, why it is that it's a lot better to have high cholesterol. Most of the big meta studies where they look at all the studies and like calculate it show that it's actually better to have it just near the top end and maybe the middle end of the average cholesterol levels. So anyway, when you have too much of that cholesterol building up, that's when the bile starts to thicken. That's the simple answer. And so basically, simple way of putting it, when you have too much toxicity, especially the very bad toxicity that your body struggles to deal with, it can't deal with it yet, it's already overwhelmed, it puts it into storage, and then that storage is the cholesterol. Now, there's a lot of debate about this, both especially I guess in the alternative health world. Is the liver a toxin storage organ or not? Right? You heard that one?
Great
Chrissy?
question. Yeah, bring one up for debate.
And of course, it's something that people like to debate, especially who consume liver, right? And so generally, those who consume liver and recommend that you consume liver will argue that it is not. And then, many, and to be honest, I think in the mainstream actually would say that it is a toxin storage organ. I personally feel like they're both right, but let me explain. The liver is not meant to be a toxin storage organ. And in fact, it is true to say that it deals with toxicity fairly poorly. In fact, you may have heard that the liver has this amazing ability to regenerate itself. Like you can cut out more than 50% of the liver and it will grow back. That is pretty amazing and true. So the reason why it has this incredible regenerative ability is because it's been constantly damaged by toxicity and it's constantly regrow itself, basically. So it is true that it doesn't have that capacity to store toxicity. So the people who recommend eating liver are kind of right. But within it does have the capacity to build up these like equivalent of drums of toxic waste that it's holding on to while it's trying to process stuff. And in fact, it can start holding on to so many of them, it can start holding on to so much cholesterol that the ratio of cholesterol to other things, especially the salts in the bile, goes off. And then the bile starts to become too thick. It's referred to as sludge. It doesn't flow anymore. And then you get cholestasis and all the stuff that we talked about earlier.
Would that also be referring to why there's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and things like that, where it's just building? Or, you know, it's, yeah. Okay, yeah.
So that's the next level. That's a great question. So everything that I'm talking about is kind of medical science kind of acknowledge it's going on, but they don't really focus on it. They can't really tell. They can't really test for it very easily. They actually could, but they don't. The way that they could is by checking the level of different bile acids that are being backwashed into the blood, because you shouldn't really have any significant amount of bile in the blood. And in fact, they do check for some of it, like bilirubin is a common marker of liver health that they do check in the blood. And so once those different types of bile start to build up in the blood, that indicates that the liver is overwhelmed. And so, as I said, the liver is not meant to be a toxin storage area. So one of the things it does is it sequesters this, I can't deal with it yet, extremely toxic, too toxic to let roam around toxicity in cholesterol. But the other thing that it does is it backwashes it back into the blood supply for the other major detoxification organ to deal with that we talked about earlier, which is the kidneys. So it's like, I can't deal with this. I'm being eaten alive by this toxicity. It's burning me and destroying me quicker than I can regenerate. Put it back in the bloodstream. Let the kidneys deal with it. But the kidneys are not, first of all, don't have as much capacity as the liver. And second of all, once it's in the bloodstream, it's not just going to the kidneys. It's affecting your brain. It's affecting your central nervous system. It's affecting your immune system. It's affecting everything. So this is where it makes you feel bad because, you know, you can't think clearly, you can't focus, you feel upset, all of those kind of things that are naturally associated with doing a cleanse, right? I feel tired, I feel all over the place, I feel brain fog, all that kind of stuff. That if it is, you know, due to the cleanse, that is the toxicity going back into the blood and excessive amounts going into the blood. So that's one way they could tell. But yes, if this cholesterol gets excessive, they can start to see it. And this is what's called a fatty liver disease. And as you said, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Why they differentiate between the two, I don't know. I mean, probably just in terms of treatment, right? Because if the cause is just alcoholism, then that's what you need to deal with. If it's, and it usually is, it's usually alcoholism to get it to such an extreme level. But it isn't always. So I think they differentiate between, okay, this person's just needs to stop drinking alcohol versus, oh, we don't actually know what the cause is in this person's case. It's some other toxin. So alcohol is just a toxin, right? Just a poison. Now, again, you can make the case that small dose, it's more of a medicine. That's up to you. But at some level, it becomes a poison, and that level is clearly visible in, you know, the alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is where it absolutely is building up because of toxicity, but they can't say it's alcohol. That is the toxin. That's the only really distinction. Otherwise, it's the same. It's just this process of beyond cholestasis. It's not just the bile being stuck. It's now like just visible, noticeable cholesterol building up in the liver. And the liver swells. The liver can swell to twice, I think even more the size. So again, it starts to get really obvious, right? They do their CT scans or MRIs. They're like, oh my God, it looks like way bigger than it should. It's got like, you know, lesions, and it's got, and oh, okay, right, this person has fatty liver disease. By that stage, they can see it. I wouldn't say by that stage it's too late, but because it's not. You can still resolve that if you have that, if you're watching this right now. But that is definitely way more advanced than you would want to be dealing with it at, right? You would want to deal with the problem way before it got to that stage, because it's definitely more difficult to deal with. As always with modern medicine, they tend to only, because their hierarchy is all about need, and they put, you know, the person who has the greatest need first. And there's a lot of people, very sick people throughout the world. Like, it's all about is it serious enough yet for us to deal with? And then there's also a certain diagnostic element of it as well. There's also, is it serious enough yet that it's obvious when we test for it? Those are kind of the two things that they're looking for.
We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com, because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code Rejuvenate. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code Rejuvenate for 20% off today. Wonderful. With all of this, how does this relate then to, leaky gut is a massive thing that we are hearing and has been out there for a very, very, very long time. So how does all this process, phase 1, phase 2, everything that you're talking about here today, cholestasis, everything, how does that relate to leaky gut? Is it part and parcel? What's going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it could lead to leaky gut in at least 2 ways. Maybe I'll think of more as I answer your question. But one of the ways it can lead to it is what I've already talked about. So if there's cholestasis, the bile is not flowing, then it could lead to it because there is a lack of dealing with those organisms. There's also going to be less breaking down of nutrients into their component parts, right? They're going to stay bigger. And so having food less broken down and having less sanitizing effect is a great recipe for SIBO or SIFO, right? Where you have an overgrowth of some kind of pathogen in the intestinal tract, the small intestine. When you have an overgrowth of a pathogen in the small intestine, then you have an immune response, which is often referred to as inflammation. And when you have that chronic inflammation, that will lead to this situation where you have, leaky gut is, what do they call it? I can't remember the proper term for it. Increased intestinal permeability. So it's just, where the tight junctions become less tight. But basically, it's usually blamed on inflammation, which is a great term, but why is it inflamed? So that's one potential reason why it's inflamed. So that's if there's no bile flowing because of cholestasis. The other option is that there is bile flowing, but the bile is highly toxic. And so that goes back to what I was going to talk about originally. And I was going to share my story. So as I said, I was feeling well for quite a while. Thought I was doing great. But what I didn't realize is the reason that I was feeling great is because I had more and more cholestasis building up. Then I started doing a bunch of stuff for my health, and I started to get pain. And this pain was in a specific place, and that place was the gallbladder. Because the liver either doesn't have nerve endings, or at least it doesn't have the type that allow you to feel what's going on in there, which is probably a good thing, right?
I think so.
And this is why often, actually, when people do have liver pain, it's often referred. They might feel it in the right shoulder, they might feel it in the rib cage or something, but there's not, you don't feel that specific organ, but you often feel the area around it if your liver is really struggling. Right shoulder blade is common, right neck, around here, trapezius, that kind of thing. But you don't actually feel the organ itself. But you feel the gallbladder, unfortunately, or fortunately. So I'd get this really stabbing pain. It wouldn't go away. Painkillers didn't work on it. And then I had someone do abdominal work at me, and they're pushing, and they're like, oh yeah, your gallbladder's really swollen. It's swollen up like a balloon. It's oh, interesting. Okay. This was someone who's 30 years experience doing abdominal massage. They're very good like kinesthetic awareness and understanding of all those organs and where they are and all the rest of it. And yeah, sure enough, I did have a medical doctor to check it as well, and they didn't have the same reaction because, you know, again, I wasn't dying, so they didn't really care. But they said, yeah, seems swollen. So, you know, either way. And so I get this pain. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know the stuff that I'm going to share with you in this call, in this recording. And then eventually, for whatever reason, it took me a long time to work out what the reason was, but the pain would stop there, but it would feel like a release. Sometimes I hear like gurgling, bubbling, and then I start to get pain, discomfort in my intestines instead. And sometimes it'd be like a stabbing pain. And so what it felt like right from the start, like 3 years ago, is that, God, my bile is so toxic. It's almost like it's burning a hole in my, you know, or that's going to sound like massive exaggeration to any mainstream person, but let's just say causing inflammation, to use the medical term, causing inflammation, very much irritating the gallbladder. It was, you know, very, very upsetting. And then when it released, the pain wasn't as intense, but it would, you know, permeate. It would be all over my small intestine. And then it would also often burn on the way out. I won't go into any more detail than that, but think of a strong curry if you need any support, or a strong Mexican. And then when it was finally gone, I'd feel better for a bit until the whole process started again. Now, I wasn't sure what that was. There was various factors that seemed to trigger it. Stress seemed to trigger it. Certain foods seemed to trigger it. And then certain movements seemed to trigger it. So I didn't know what it was. And I investigated all kinds of possibilities. I thought maybe it's like my nervous system overreacting to it. I thought maybe it's like some kind of infectious thing. But eventually all of that was kind of like addressed thoroughly, ruled out, proven, disproven. And so all I was left with is this issue without an explanation. And I came across toxic bile theory. And I was like, finally there's something that actually understands and explains what I've gone through these years. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why I've embraced it, because it's the only explanatory model that actually made sense. And then when I started really investigate toxicity, that's when I discovered that I had high levels of mycotoxins, I had high levels of lead. And so these are things that are, you know, extremely toxic. And the way that you deal with, especially the mycotoxins in a nutshell, is you support your body in getting the mycotoxins into the bile and then getting the bile out of the body. We'll talk more about what's involved in that in a minute. But so for me, it was a revelation. And so realizing a lot of the time when you feel better, here's the interesting thing. Things that cause cholestasis or things that increase cholestasis often make you feel better for a while. And when I say a while, it really depends on a lot of different factors, but it could even be a decade or two. So for a decade or two, you feel better, but you're actually getting worse. That's the really scary thing. Now, why is that the case? Let me explain. So this is the last one, intrahepatic circulation. Why would you feel better when your liver and gallbladder have this bile stuck in them and they're not moving? Surely you're less able to digest food. You'd feel a little bit worse, if anything, wouldn't you, if you have cholestasis? Well, here's the thing. Now, you may say either I'm very sensitive and aware, or you could say my bile was just really toxic and anyone would feel that if theirs is that toxic. That's hard to know for sure. But whatever it is, it will affect you some way if your bile is toxic. It may not be as extreme as mine, but it will affect you some way if it's moving. Because here's the thing. When your bile is toxic, and when it starts moving, as I said, it moves in two directions. It moves the direction it's supposed to, and it also moves the direction it's not supposed to. So let's talk about both. So if it moves the direction it's supposed to, it goes from the liver. It's got all of these. It's like a tree. They sometimes call it the biliary tree. So very little, tubes going into bigger tubes, going into much bigger tubes, going into a few bigger ones that then go for this duct into the gallbladder, this storage area. So when those are all stuck, let's do it the other way. So when those are flowing, it goes to the gallbladder, then it goes into the small intestine. Now, here's the thing. what most people don't know is that everything that you absorb through your small intestine, so you absorb it through these little, they're called villi, they're like these tiny little blood-saturated tentacles that cover all 30 feet of this small intestine tubing. And they're the ones that can get damaged by, eating foods that are not good. And people say gluten wears it down and stuff like that. But whatever. They're there to catch the nutrients and absorb them. But here's the thing. When they do that, the nutrients and also other stuff that maybe you don't want that they're absorbing, like, we'll get into that in a minute, all of that stuff doesn't go straight into the bloodstream to then go to your heart and all the rest of it. No. It goes into the liver first. And so then from there, the liver distributes it out to the rest of the body, the nutrients, as it sees fit. And obviously it tries to distribute out the nutrients and not distribute out the toxins, right? It tries to hold on to them, process them, deal with them, and try to get it out again. Now, here's the thing. The intrahepatic circulation thing is not that. I just had to say that to explain the next thing. The intrahepatic circulation thing is this. When your body releases that bile into the small intestine, it is then very efficient at reabsorbing that bile, which unfortunately means it also reabsorbs all the toxins in the bile. Why on earth would it do that? It's gone to all the effort of getting it ready to get out of the body, then it reabsorbs it and kind of starts all over again. Why does it do that? It's because throughout most of our evolutionary history, we've had a lack of nutrients and a relatively low amount of poisons that we have inflicted on us on a chronic basis. Yes, we might have eaten rotten meat. Yes, we might have even, sometimes accidentally consumed some lead, some whatever. But we weren't consistently breathing it in 24 hours a day, getting it on our skin, on a regular basis, absorbing it through our skin on a regular basis. We weren't constantly having foods and water and liquids full of it all day, every day. We weren't wearing clothes that were covered in toxins. So we didn't have that constant, continuous exposure that we have these days, which I've barely even mentioned, I realized, in an episode on detoxification, because, as I said, I'm more interested in what your body does with it. I mean, the simple thing to say is, make sure that you filter your water. Check the ingredient labels on any food that you eat that isn't a whole food, and the more things it's got in there that you don't recognize, don't eat it. All of that kind of advice. Maybe we'll get into that, but I want to get into I feel like you probably already know that to some degree if you're watching this, so I want to get more into the nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah, and they can also check the digestion episode, because I think we did go into some detail there as well with, the things that you're taking in as well. So, get to the nitty-gritty here.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, I didn't know that. So why does it reabsorb it? Because throughout most of our history, we didn't have enough nutrients, at least some nutrients, and there wasn't that much toxicity. So it just made sense, right? So we reabsorb most of it. No big deal. Main thing is we can't waste all of that cholesterol. We can't waste all those precious ingredients that, because starvation, if you look at most animals, their primary focus is, sure, don't get eaten, and sure, reproduce at certain times. But more than that, it's just eating, right? Predators are like almost always hungry, constantly, trying, because it's not easy to kill something that can run away and hide and all the rest of it. So predators are almost always hungry. We're at least part predator, and then the non-predators, the herbivores, they're almost always eating, right? So animals are either hunting all day or eating all day, most of the time, or all night whenever they're up. So that's a big deal. Starvation is a big deal for most species on this planet still, and throughout most of our history. So that is why the body goes, reabsorb, reutilize as much as possible. Now we're in this completely different environment. We got as much nutrients as we need. Now, okay, a lot of people are in a nutrient deficient diet. I realize that, but everyone, who's able to access this video, let's just say, can get every nutrient pretty easily, right? You can get protein powder extremely cheap if you can't afford, normal protein. in foods. You can get like a vitamin, multi-mineral, like really, really cheap. Like those basic nutrients, and of course, fat and carbs, right, are everywhere, incredibly easy to get. So just calories, right? That's something that we didn't have access to throughout most of history. Anyway, so it's reabsorbing it, but it's reabsorbing the toxicity. We're in this opposite situation. We don't want that to happen. So there are two main factors that make your body like either reabsorb more bile with all the toxins or not. The main thing that encourages it to absorb more bile is more fat in your diet. I'm not against having fat in your diet. I'm just telling you, this is just the way it is. In fact, I'm quite pro having fat in your diet, but this is just the way it is. The more fat that you consume in your diet, the bile will bond with it, conjugate with it to some significant degree, and then it'll be more reabsorbed. If you do have a pure carb diet, a fruitarian diet, a rice diet, or whatever people do, it is true you will not absorb anywhere near as much bile. And this may explain why some people get better on those kind of diets. Obviously, there are easy explanations as to why they get worse because they're lacking all these essential nutrients. But some people, that bile is so toxic that if they eat a lot of fruits, which are high acid and high carbohydrate, the acidity will help to get the bile flowing, because we said sour, that's one of the three things. If it's not completely sludged up and stuck, the sour will trigger more of it to be released, and then they will not reabsorb as much because they're not having any fat with it. So that's one of the reasons potentially why a person could feel better on that kind of diet. The other thing that really helps the body to not reabsorb that bile is soluble fiber. Now, different soluble fibers have different levels of effectiveness, but this is, so if we're talking about like a classic low-fat vegan diet, maybe a person starts eating a load of beans, a load of whole grains, this kind of thing. This is where the oats, all that kind of stuff. This is where, again, they may feel better because they're binding a lot of that bile. Maybe they're also eating more healthy, so they're having more bitter vegetables with their meals, which is also helping bile flow. And so all together helps the bile to flow. It helps to stop the bile being reabsorbed, gets more of the toxins out of the body, and they feel better. So yeah, those are the main factors.
Wonderful. So let me ask you this then. When it's being reabsorbed back in, if we're eating a high-fat diet, and let's say, so then...
Or even just medium fat. I'm really talking about, unless you're on a really low-fat diet, you're going to reabsorb quite a lot. Like a normal diet is like 30 to 50% calories from fat. That'll reabsorb a lot of the toxicity, most of the toxicity. You'd have to be in a really low-fat diet to not
experience that. So let me ask you this. How and what effect does that then have on our immune systems? Because I know as well, today there is so much with autoimmune disease here, there, it's just everywhere now. So whether that is... is there a correlation here?
Yeah, it's a great question. Oh, so that reminds me of what I was talking about earlier. So I said there's two ways that the bile can flow, right? Once it starts to get unstuck. One of them is the way it should, but the other way is the way it shouldn't. So back to why we feel better when we're on cholestasis, and then I will answer your question. When we have cholestasis, we do not have the bile flowing into the digestive tract, which doesn't irritate the digestive tract with its extreme level of toxicity. And we also don't have that toxicity going back into the liver for it to have to process and deal with all over again. So that takes that burden off the liver. But the other thing, and probably the most important thing of all, for most people who don't, unless you're the kind of person who has digestive issues, is the toxic bile that's backwashed back into the blood. And from there, it can affect any system in your body. And this is one of the things that we, went over in the genetic episode, is that when your body has that strain, whether it's high stress, high toxicity, or low nutritional deficiency, or pathogenic organism, or whatever the stress is, when your body has that stress, it will tend to hit you where you're weakest. Now, you may be weakest in an area for an environmental reason. For instance, if you do a job where you're breathing, loads of toxic smoke all day, you're more likely to have a lung issue, of course, or asbestos or whatever. But overall, it will often just hit you wherever you're genetically weaker, right? And so when that toxic bile backwashes back into the circulatory system, it basically gets everywhere. And then this is the toxic bile theory, that wherever you start getting problems, wherever you start getting health issues, that's where the toxicity has reached and started creating problems. And so the most obvious version of that is the skin, right? So once the toxicity gets into the blood, one of the first things that your body tries to do, in some cases, it will always try and do it, but in some cases it will be more noticeable than others. It really depends, again, on how your body works. It will try and push it out through the skin. And this is why, in Eastern medicine, especially Chinese medicine, they actually say a person who has skin issues like psoriasis, acne, eczema, all that kind of thing, it's a sign of health, which is kind of true because what they say is the toxicity is not very deep yet, which is good from their point of view. And this is kind of true as well from a biochemical point of view, because if your body has the capacity, the strength to push a large amount out through the skin, yes, it's very, maybe embarrassing for people. Yes, it's maybe very inconvenient if it makes you itch, and you're trying not to itch in front of people and whatnot. Yes, it can be very painful if it's, weeping sores and all the rest of it. So I realize it can be horrible. I'm not trying to underestimate it, but it is a way for the body to get the toxicity out. A classic sign, by the way, that you do have excess bile is itchiness. If you get like a chronic itching on your skin, that is a sign that there's bile trying to get out through your skin. That's something I've come across from many people, even those who've never heard of toxic bile theory. So that's like a consistent bit of clinical feedback from a lot of people who work with people. Anyway, so back to your point, this bile can damage whatever is weakest, whatever your weakest links are, right? Now, why? Again, the bile is not dangerous. Some people might be hearing this misunderstanding. Oh, the bile is so toxic. No. The bile's fine. It shouldn't really be in your blood. It shouldn't really be anywhere else in your body other than your digestive tract. It's true. But it's not that bad. The problem is the stuff that the bile is holding, that is supposed to be transporting and storing safely. And so when that poison gets into the blood supply, even in minute quantities, let's say heavy metals, for example, let's say mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are the chemical warfare agents created by molds to fight with other molds and to fight with bacteria and to fight with fungi and to fight with yeast. They're incredibly toxic. They're extremely toxic. The UK government actually classes them in the same category of danger as asbestos, which most people have heard of, right? Like a house with mold infection is just as dangerous as a house with asbestos contamination. Unfortunately, in the UK, in reality, it's treated as common and not really addressed, but at least officially it is designated at the same level of toxicity, which is deserved. And mycotoxins are particularly a problem for a couple of reasons, a few different reasons. I'll talk about this more fully in one episode, but I'll just labor on this a little bit just to go to address the point you made, Chrissy, because the mycotoxins actually have a big impact on the immune system. So mycotoxins are very, very small, first of all. So they can absolutely be absorbed through the lungs. You can breathe them in. You can't breathe mold in through the lungs. They're too big to go through the barrier of the lungs. But the mycotoxins are much smaller and they can go through. They're also so small they can go through walls. So you can be in a house where you think it's beautiful and pristine, and if you have a basement, you have an attic, loft, you have an area in between walls that is moldy, you could be having it pouring in and making you sick and have no idea of what's going on. So the size of it is an issue. Another issue is that it is fat soluble. So you'd say, oh, it's good. The body can put it in the cholesterol, right? Well, yes, but the problem is like every cell of your body is dependent on this fat lipid. And so it can basically go in there and disrupt the cell and stop the cell from functioning properly. And if we're talking about a brain cell, or an immune cell, that can be a really, really, really significant problem. Really any cell, right, that is hard to, replace. As we said, liver cells are quite regularly regenerating, but, a lot of other skin cells and stuff like that. But other cells are not, brain cells especially are very difficult to replace. So can these toxins damage the immune system? Absolutely. How do they do it? My understanding is that they go in and cause actual damage to the DNA, which means that when it's trying to replicate itself, or it's a lot of what DNA is constantly doing with RNA is sending out these chains of amino acids, whether it's peptides or proteins or other, complexes made with amino acids and other stuff. It's almost like those let's say peptides for simplicity. It's almost like those peptides are like words that are instructions. They literally kind of are. It's like a binary language, except it's with 4 rather than 2. So it's quaternary. But it's like that. They're all like these little chemical messages. Do this, do that. And so when the DNA is damaged, and this absolutely happens, again, this is mainstream, the fact that this DNA happens, scientists are still trying to discover what causes this DNA damage. Because if they understand that, they also just, understand what causes aging. Because aging is really just this thing I'm talking about, where the replication process doesn't happen correctly. And so maybe it's not the only cause, maybe there's built in this and that, but one of the things that absolutely is a problem for that replication happening properly and those signals going through properly. Because think about the difference between saying a word to someone and just changing one letter. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but just changing one letter can completely change the meaning of the word, right? And so that's constantly going on when this DNA is damaged. These signals are being sent, but they're the wrong signals. And so, a common example of this, when it comes to the immune system, which is incredibly complex and a little bit orchestral and potentially a little bit delicate, is that there's too many of the attacking elements of the immune system and not enough of the regulating elements of the immune system. This is something that science has studied quite a lot, and that's where you end up with chronic inflammation, because inflammation is something that that should only happen temporarily. Now, I don't think that's the only thing that causes chronic inflammation. But it's definitely one of the things, that there's a lack of the regulatory immune cells that tell the immune system to calm down, to tell it to stop attacking. And so, again, that's down to that DNA damage. So do I think it has an impact on the immune system and creates autoimmunity and all the rest of it? Well, let's address autoimmunity. So that's damage to the immune system. But what is autoimmunity? So the whole thing that the immune system is supposed to do is that the immune system has a very clear barrier between inside and outside the body. So we talked about this before, right? Technically, the whole digestive tract is outside the body, and, I won't repeat it all. So it has that clarity, and then it has a very clear idea of self and not self. Or another way of putting it is what's supposed to be there and what's not supposed to be there. And this is really, really important because when it comes to unmitigated proliferation of cells, often called tumors or the C word, the immune system is the main thing that's supposed to stop that, because it sees that it's not happening correctly and goes, oh, that's not self, or it's supposed to. And then it's supposed to go and kill that cell, which is called apoptosis, before it starts proliferating more, before it affects other cells. Like, we constantly have this going on. The reason why we don't all die from that thing young is because the immune system is functioning and doing its job. So the thing to take from that, the immune system's constantly on lookout for not self. Now, every time that this chain of amino acids is kind of, for a better word, printed incorrectly by the DNA and the RNA, it's printed incorrectly, therefore it's not what it should be. It's like something else. And so the immune system is like, that shouldn't be there. And then it starts attacking it. So it's kind of a big statement to make, and maybe we should do a whole separate episode on that. But my understanding of autoimmunity is that it starts with this poison damage right on the DNA level. And I'm sure there's other causes for it, but I believe this is the major one. it starts this DNA damage, which then means that your own system starts printing things that look like pathogens, that look like foreign outside invaders, and then they get attacked by your immune system. And so it's like, why is your immune system attacking your thyroid, which is Hashimoto's, right? Why is it attacking these different places that it shouldn't be? Why is it attacking your joints in the case of arthritis or whatever? Why is it doing that? And so the general mainstream view of that is it's doing it because it's deranged, it's dysfunctional, it's not working properly. As I say, I give some credibility to that as well, but I'd say the why isn't it working properly? It's the same answer. It's like the immune system isn't working properly because the DNA is damaged. And then the immune system kind of actually is working properly because it's meant to clear out the things that aren't supposed to be there, which is what it's doing. But the problem is our own DNA is printing more and more of the thing that isn't supposed to be there. So then no wonder it doesn't get better. And then we take things to kind of suppress the immune system, which helps, but obviously doesn't, address the actual issue. And yeah, although that's kind of the catchphrase for a lot of the treatment to any chronic disease. Okay, so I'll ask you.
Yeah, I would say, going into, especially with, this is, as you know, this body, for me, it just has this incredible intelligence. So when it just saying like the immune system is just attacking itself, it's like, no, there's got to be a good reason. We got to really get down to the crux of it and figure it out. And so learning more about the detoxification and learning more that there's these potential toxins flowing through us that our body is trying to put away, safeguard, or potentially flowing in our blood, or potentially the DNA and the RNA process, there's a miscommunication or something's not being printed correctly. It makes sense that the immune system is trying to go clean it all up. But then we have to step in and be able to help it to do it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back to, I kind of forgot to bring this up earlier, but it's probably a good place to do it. Like the fundamental, not misunderstanding, but like missing element of mainstream medicine, which it goes back to that debate between Pasteur and Bouchamp, I think over 100 years ago. So there was this debate by two very notable people who both were, very respectable, very esteemed, had a decent, very big following for the time, all the rest of it. And it was about the root cause of disease. And so this is, before this, pathogens hadn't even been discovered, right? Bacteria wasn't even a thing. So this is right at the beginning of this whole system, before antibiotics, certainly, all that. And so they were debating what is the cause of disease. And Pasteur's position was it is caused by pathogenic organisms. And again, I'm obviously paraphrasing this and simplifying it massively. But he would say that the proof of that is that if there is no pathogenic organism, then and remember, back then, most diseases were infectious diseases. These days, they're not. They're chronic diseases, but back then they were. So you'd say if the organism is not present, then there's no disease. So that proves that the organism is the cause of the disease. Now, Bouchamp's kind of retort to that, and again, massively paraphrasing and simplifying, is that, okay, but not everyone who's exposed to the pathogen gets the disease, right? And this has been significantly proven, even recently by Wim Hof, right? That he was able to even take a pathogen, or technically, I guess it was a toxin created by a pathogen, endotoxin, where everyone else would basically get sick, and he was able to prove that he had no symptoms at all when it was injected into him, and he could train a bunch of other people to do the same. So again, but this has been found throughout history. Even the extremely infectious diseases do not have 100% infection rate. And even the extremely terminal diseases like, Ebola, there's still a few people who catch it and don't die and survive and are okay, right? So his counter to it was, it's not the pathogen that's the problem, it's the territory. Meaning, if a pathogen goes into a sick environment, let's say a toxic environment with maybe a bunch of misprinted DNA stuff, mainly peptides and amino acid stuff, proteins, by the DNA, then yes, there's going to be illness. But if the pathogen goes into an environment where that is not the case or is less the case, then there is not illness. Now, both of them were technically right, would be my perspective, right? And again, whenever there's sides in the debate that seem opposite, I always like to see when is this person right, when is this person right, and what's the synthesis, what's the understanding underlying it. So they're both technically right, but then I guess maybe they agreed on that, but the question still was then what to emphasize, right? So Pasteur's perspective was, well, just, we're just going to make sure, right, sanitation was a big thing that didn't exist before then. One of the reasons why a lot of women died in childbirth is because doctors would handle dead bodies and then immediately, without washing their hands, would be, sticking their hands inside them while helping them give birth. So, yeah, obviously that was not a good idea. So preventing contamination and transmission. And then later antibiotics came along, right, killing the pathogens, and then also vaccinations came along, and let's not talk about that. So all of that was like working on a pathogen level. But Bouchon's point was, well, let's work on a terrain level. Let's get the tissues of the body, the organs of the body, the glands of the body, the immune system of the body, all the systems of the body so healthy, and toxin free, and giving them all the nutrients they need and all the rest of it, that we're not susceptible to pathogenic organisms. And basically, in the mainstream, Bouchon utterly lost that argument. I mean, he completely, if it was a boxing match, it would be like a knockout. He thoroughly lost. But of course, most of what is now referred to as alternative or natural health or whatever is kind of more aligned with that, although not exclusively. There are plenty of herbalists and all the rest of it who will, still give you herbs to kill organisms. That I guess it's a bit more balanced, but it's more terrain focused. So, and I heard a great analogy for this. Can't remember who it was, but yeah. So a great analogy for it is this, because a lot of people remember that way, and I know I do. He talked about garbage strikes back in the 1980s in, I think, New York City, in Manhattan, and how the garbage men were on strike, garbage people on strike, probably garbage men back then, and And so because of that, garbage is just piling up in the streets. It already piles up a bit in the streets, right, in the city, even when garbage men are coming regularly. So you can imagine what it was like. And so eventually rats came along, and the rats would, make things worse, right? They would be scurrying around, they'd be crapping, they would be destroying the garbage and all the rest of it. And so kind of a way to look at that is to say, okay, when that situation happens, who is at fault? And so the Pasteur position, which has become mainstream medicine, would be, God, those rats are the problem. We just need to set a bunch of rat traps. We need to, we need to do a bunch of poison. We need to kill those rats. They are the problem because they are starting to now invade our home and all the rest of it. This is not good. Now, that may be true, but the Bouchon position would be, but what about the garbage? Surely if the garbage weren't there in the first place, the rats never would have come. And probably more importantly, if the garbage issue is not addressed, won't they just come back? And it's the latter point which is, particularly important. And I guess the answer is, the analogy maybe falls down a little bit here, because the answer is not necessarily, right? There are some people who get a chronic infection and then they just take an antibiotic and it doesn't come back. And then the issue is that just a rat got in and otherwise the place is fine. But, what we see these days a lot, again, is not that, right? It's chronic infections. It's sinus infections coming again and again, ear infections coming again and again, UTIs happening again and again, respiratory infections happening again and again, digestive infections, going on and on and on, or coming in and again. And the people take these things, the antibiotics or antivirals or whatever, and even antiparasitics. But the stuff comes back. The pathogenic organism comes back because of the underlying issue was not actually addressed. So my view on this is this. If there's an acute infection, meaning probably the type that a doctor actually cares about, something that's potentially life-threatening or that could really damage you, you probably do want to go down the route, well, not probably, you almost certainly, unless you have a very good reason for it, do want to go down the route of just treating the infection, right? But when it comes to chronic disease, which is what most of us suffer from most of the time these days, I don't know if it's the smartest approach. I would say maybe we've got to deal with the garbage, not the rats, or maybe the garbage and the rats. But unless we deal with the garbage, the rats are going to keep coming back, to use that analogy. I hope that makes sense.
No, yeah, it definitely makes sense. I mean, one of the things that you've opened my eyes to, especially when we've been doing some of the testing, is that there are things that help the system work better, which would essentially be the garbage trucks coming in to help take out the trash. And I know in some of my reports, I looked and there were some definite nutritional deficiencies where certain processes aren't able to function within the body. So, I mean, can you talk to us? I think this is a good time to talk a little bit about that and potentially where we could be falling down, because there are these certain nutritional deficiencies that we are having that aren't allowing our body to essentially take out the trash.
There are, but I would say rather than focusing on nutritional, because it's all the usual stuff, Chrissy. It's the stuff we've talked about before. And I think it was in your case, right? Certain amino acids, certain B vitamins, magnesium. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. But, it's kind of the usual suspects. Zinc was one, I think. And if it wasn't for you, it usually is in people, right? There are certain things like that. That absolutely, vitamin D3 is another one, which I recommend people always take with K2. So yeah, there's a few things like that, absolutely. And then, the stress issue, which we've talked about before. I won't go into that again, but when the body's in a stress state, that's another thing that stops the whole detoxification system working properly. So nutritional deficiencies can do it, stress can do it. But the main thing to me is that we're not supporting our body with phase 3 detoxification. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So it's an interesting thing, like the cliche of you go to a doctor and, they'll probably just give you antibiotics or these days an antidepressant and send you on your way. They'll kind of give it for everything. So there's like a naturopath equivalent to that. And it was like, whatever the patient comes in with, you basically just give them bitter herbs and send them on their way. And so the reason for that is because from that naturopathic perspective, cholestasis, even though they might not have used that terminology, but lack of bile flow is really one of the key health issues that causes all other health issues. Because we didn't really talk about this yet, but the liver doesn't just deal with toxicity and help you digest foods. That's actually just the tip of the iceberg, even though it's a lot of its mass is doing because it's overloaded. It shouldn't be, as we talked about earlier. It shouldn't be holding toxins. It shouldn't be blowing up to twice its size to try and deal with it. The liver is actually kind of involved in almost every process of the body. So the brain and the nervous system are kind of ultimately in charge of things. You could call them like the supreme commander, but the liver is more like the general. The liver is more like the thing that is actually doing a lot of those chemical reactions that make everything run. And dealing with toxicity is only one of its many functions. One of its other functions, which is specifically relevant to people who've watched a lot of our episodes, is it's in charge of keeping the right level of most of the hormones that we've talked about. Thyroid hormone, sex hormone, adrenal hormones, all of those hormones, making them in the first place, converting them. And the neurotransmitters that we've talked about. We talked about dopamine, we talked about GABA, we talked about serotonin, we talked about noradrenaline, all of that stuff. The liver has a massive role in all of that. And so it's not really possible to feel great if the liver is not functioning great without a tremendous amount of artifice. Meaning, like, you need so many props, right? Like, and I'm in this category, right? In order to, I feel great, which puts me ahead of most people. But it requires a bunch of different things for me to be able to do that. And that's because I still have that toxicity level. If my liver was unburdened with toxicity and I was otherwise living the lifestyle that I did, I don't think I would need any of that, or I'd need way less. And I talked about that, in the Feeling Good episodes about how I'm about to recommend a bunch of stuff. But I realized ultimately the goal is that you don't need any of that because your body's making it all for you. And that's something that the liver is able to do when it is not overburdened with other stuff, specifically this toxicity issue. So the liver is crucial for us to actually be able to feel good. I guess that's the bottom line of what I'm saying. And let's say feel good, I'm talking about emotions. I'm talking about our perception. I'm talking about, our how we feel about the world, how we think about the world. The liver is absolutely crucial to that because it controls, to a large degree, the hormones and also to a significant degree the neurotransmitters.
Yeah, that has a massive impact on everything. And we know if we're not feeling well, that's going to put a stop to pretty much everything. And also that the body needs to have enough energy to do those functions. And usually when we're not feeling well, our body doesn't have the energy to move forward and do things like that. I'm going to go into this next question, which is, you do see, and I do see, a lot of people that are out there that are constantly detoxing, cleansing. We opened with that, but they're not getting better. What is the reason?
That's a great question. So there's a few different reasons for that. First of all, they're retoxing. Now, they may either be retoxing purposefully. So I see this a lot with like models, actresses and actors, sports people, athletes. They have this desire to get in peak condition some of the time. And then in the off season, whatever you call it, they're partying, they're taking drugs, they're staying up for days, whatever it may be. And so that's one reason. That's a bit more of an obvious one. And if that's you, then you probably already know, and that's fair enough. I mean, that's just the price you pay for having that lifestyle some of the time, right? But the people I would speak to more is the people who that's not the case for. And okay, maybe you slip up, maybe you have a chocolate sometimes, or this or that, a bit of cake, a bit of donut, a bit of I don't know, pizza, but a drink of alcohol, whatever. But generally, you do try and be healthier. Your lifestyle is healthier than most of the people around you, and it's not working. You're still not feeling better, right? And so what's going on there? Well, you may be retoxing without realizing it. And so this is one of the things I'm going to talk about, maybe not on the next episode, but certainly within the next few. I've already previewed one, and that's mycotoxins, right? You could be exercising every day. You could be meditating. You could be, eating the best organic food. You could be, not taking any drugs, not drinking alcohol, not smoking. You could be doing all that stuff. And then also you could have a pristine, clean house, and you're breathing in a massive amount of mycotoxin because there's some black mold behind something that you had no idea about, and you'd have to knock a wall in to find it. And that's absolutely ruining your health. So that's an example of retoxing where a person is really innocent, right? They have no idea that that's what's going on. Asbestos might be some example. Maybe, if you live in the countryside, that's great, but maybe, someone's spraying pesticides right nearby you, and that's actually, really, really dangerous and toxic. Maybe you're living in a city and, there's some industrial plant billowing out chemicals right by you or whatever, right? There may be that kind of stuff that is outside your control, but is getting you anyway. And then you may accidentally be eating or drinking or consuming. There may be something in your food. There may be something in your skincare products. There may be something in your water. And even if you don't drink your tap water, maybe we absorb certain chemicals from just being in a shower with contaminated water, like way, way, way more than we would from drinking the water. It can have way more of a toxic effect on us. So we could be retoxing accidentally. We could be retoxing on purpose, and we could be retoxing accidentally. But whatever is the case in terms of that regard, what I recommend is if you really... Okay, let's go back to what the medical doctor would say about it. If you say, is it an issue that I'm absorbing all these toxins? They would say, no, not really. Why not? Oh, because your body can deal with that. Can it? Yes. Okay. Is that true? Well, the proof is in the pudding, right? If a person's healthy, happy, productive, young beyond their years, I guess their body can deal with it, right? But if that's not you, if you're not healthy or you're not happy or you're not clear-headed or you're not productive or you're not feeling young beyond your years, then maybe your body's not keeping up with it, right? And so there's two basic ways that we can deal with this terrain issue. And I suggest doing both, but you've probably heard the first one a million times. I want to give you the other one. The one way is obviously to reduce the toxins coming in, right? That's the one you've heard a million times. And of course, that's right. But the other way is to support your body with the toxins going out. And so that is the goal of course, anyone who's doing a cleanse or doing a detox, right? But if we look at most cleanses and most detoxes, a lot of them, they just consist of actually the first category, right? It's just reducing the stuff going in. Maybe you're doing a sugar cleanse, maybe you're doing a gluten cleanse, maybe you're doing a fast, maybe you're doing a juice fast, maybe you're doing, like some sweating, maybe you're doing, panchakarma, maybe you're doing some yoga and massage treatments. What else do people do with detox? Maybe you're taking some product, and this is the thing that is often most dismissed and laughed at by mainstream medicine people. The very idea that you could take in something that makes you detox, that's absurd. And you know what? To some degree, they're kind of right. They're not totally right, because there are absolutely things that you can take in that will speed up or kind of support phase one of the phase one detoxification processes or more. There are some of the things you could take in that will support one or more of the phase two detoxification processes. The danger of doing that on its own without what I'm about to recommend is, like I said earlier, a lot of the time, if you're just supporting those phases of the detox process, you can actually just support your body turning something toxic into something more toxic, and then that's it, and then leaving it there. So that that is one of the reasons why if you take, say, just milk thistle or curcumin, neither of which are bad, both of which we sell, but if you take it on its own without understanding anything, it can actually make you feel worse because it's speeding up a particular process, but it has not really dealt with the issue, which is the buildup of toxicity in the intrahepatic circulation. So the number one thing that I like to focus on, and this is stuff we don't sell, so again, maybe we will by the time you watch this, who knows? But right now, this is purely altruistic, is to support the body, not like speeding up some of the processes of dealing with the toxins, but supporting the body to break down the cholestasis. So stop the bile being blocked. So that's step one. Step two, get the bile moving. So getting flowing out of the liver and gallbladder into the digestive tract so it can then go out. And then number three, binding the bile and the toxicity to stop it being reabsorbed. And those three steps that I just said together constitute the difference between you being very successful at detox and making rapid progress, or you making no progress, or maybe even thinking you're making progress, but making yourself worse, so that you end up, like I did a few years ago, having a health crisis because you thought you had sorted everything out, and all you actually did, well, maybe you've done some great stuff, but one of the things you did is you've created cholestasis in yourself, which then meant that the toxins were just building up more and more and more until the dam breaks. And I consider myself actually lucky that the dam broke for me the way that it did. For a lot of people, they end up with fatty liver disease, or, and this is obviously contentious and not proven, but my understanding is, it builds up to such a level that then it does start leaking into the bloodstream, and then it poisons something, and then you get a lot of those serious diseases that I won't mention by name to not get in trouble, but you know what I mean. Should we talk about each step?
I think so. I think this is a really great question. I mean, no, let's just go straight into the steps here.
Okay. So the first one I can actually answer your question now. The first step of helping that bile flow rather than be stuck is a nutritional one. So there are nutritional interventions for that. And these are mainly the things that will help the bile to, as I said, not be sludgy, not be too thick, and to flow. So first of all, there are certain nutrients that your body needs to make that bile and keep it in the right ratios, kind of like ingredients, baking a cake. And one of them is choline. So there's different forms of choline. There's acetylcholine, there's phosphatidylcholine, there's citicholine, there's alpha GPC. All of those types of choline and more can be beneficial. They're all just different types of choline. Some of them are better at getting into the blood-brain barrier. Some of them are better for your body to make. Acetylcholine, which is your memory molecule. But all of them will support your body. Some people have genes where they make less choline than others. We have a genetic report for that. If you have less of the capacity to make your own choline, especially, then you definitely need more from diet than other people. My biggest issue with choline is most of the foods that are high in choline, I do not recommend to people because they're also high in some kind of toxin. I'll probably explain that in more detail in another episode, but I feel like choline is one of the things that's really good to supplement. Again, don't sell it currently, just telling you. And it's something that I take pretty much religiously. Another thing is vitamin C. One of the things that makes vitamin C so beneficial, I believe, it's not really supporting the immune system directly. The evidence that it does is actually pretty scant. But one of the effects that it does has, that anyone knows, is if you take enough of it, it will make you go to the toilet. It's a laxative effect. That is undeniable. How does it have a laxative effect? Well, again, it's the same thing. It's a sour thing that causes flow of bile, first of all. And second of all, it also helps to, what's the word? A little bit like detergent on grease. It helps to unstick the bile. Let's just put it that way, simplify it. So that's important as well. Taurine is an amino, out of all the amino acids, it's the amino acid that is most important for the bile to function properly. Taurine is high in mainly animal foods, especially heart specifically. So if you do eat, all parts of the animal, I'm not a fan these days of liver, which I'll explain in a different episode. But if you do eat animals, animal heart sometimes can be good. If that sounds very unappealing to you, again, you can supplement it. And it is high to some degree in other food, but again, mainly more animal food, meat in general. And there's TUDCA. So TUDCA is a bile salt, and it's basically taurine bound to a bile salt. So you kind of get 2 for 1. TUDCA, like a form of TUDCA, basically without the T, is something that is something very close to what a medical professional will actually give you if you're in that situation of a blocked bile duct. And it's either that or surgery, usually. So it's either get the bile flowing again, or cut the gallbladder out. That's usually the way that they do it. So TUDCA is something you can actually get as a supplement. There's loads of studies about how beneficial it is for improving, levels of liver enzymes and liver function, all the rest. Well, no surprise. It's just getting the bile to flow, which will have all those benefits. Although we'll have some drawbacks, as we talked about. Once it starts flowing, you may feel worse. And sure enough, there is a bit of a side effect profile for TUDCA. It can make you feel worse, which is why they often say, start on a lower dose and increase gradually and all the rest of it. Can also have a laxative effect. Anything that gets bile flowing can and does have a laxative effect. Oh, we didn't talk about this. How can you tell if bile is flowing? The easiest way to tell is, do you need laxative to go to the toilet? And do you have a number 2 really after every meal or after every proper meal? I mean, if you just have an apple or something or a banana, okay, fine. But if you're having a full meal with protein, fat, and all the rest of it, you should be going to the toilet. That's my understanding, but it's also my experience. That's not what the mainstream will say. They'll say once a day is fine, or even, once a week is fine. Some of them will say, yeah.
No.
Chris is shaking her head.
No.
Again, fine as in, will it kill you to go to the toilet twice a week? No, you'll probably survive for decades. Are you going to be healthy? It's not going to help be healthy at all, because you're getting less toxicity out. It's as simple as that, right? I mean, I could go into more detail, but let's just leave it there. So one way you can tell is how frequently you go into the toilet without a laxative. Now, again, if you wake up in the morning and you have a cigarette or you have a coffee, that's a laxative, right? I'm saying if you don't have any laxative, can you go to the toilet? That's one indication. Another indication is the color of your stool. Now, you may not look, and this is not foolproof because what you eat can affect the color. But if you're not consuming a lot of green foods, basically, if the bile is not flowing, your bowel movements, unless you're having a strong, like if you're having beetroot or whatever, that'll turn it red. There are certain things that will color it, but unless you're having a strong colorant, if the bile is not flowing, it will tend to be more of a light brown, like a tan kind of color. If the bile is flowing, it will be more of a dark brown, and you might even notice a greenish hue to it if you have a lot of bile. Dark brown, greenish hue means that at least at that moment, you did not have cholestasis. You might have cholestasis in general, but whatever, the bile was flowing for that bowel movement. So that's the easiest way to tell. For me, I can absolutely tell. And there's 100% the correlation for me. When I have that pain badly, suddenly I have way more constipation than before, and it's light colored. As soon as it releases, starts flowing, the pain goes away or it diminishes because it may have, irritated the gallbladder by then. And suddenly I go to the toilet easily again without support, and it's dark, like clockwork. So you don't take my word for that. Test it out for yourself. So that's how you can tell. So back to how you can get it to flow. So I talked about things to dissolve it. Now the other thing is to get it to move. So as I said, bitters will get it to move, and sours will get it to move. Bitter food can kind of taste, it's kind of like drying. But so that can be a downside to it. If you already feel very dry, bitter can make it worse. Sours, and when I say bitter herbs, what's the most common bitter herb in the world, Chrissy?
Oh, gosh. I know you've probably told me before when we talked about my memory. You're going to have to remind me.
Coffee.
Yes.
Most common bitter herb in the world, followed closely by tea and chocolate. Tea, chocolate, and coffee, all bitter herbs, all have that laxative effect to various degrees. I think coffee is the strongest. Actually, even tobacco is a bitter herb and also has that effect. So, however, not the ones I'd recommend. I would probably recommend like a classic, like a Swedish bitters formulas or something like that, which has gentian and uva ursi and goldenrod and stuff like that. Berberine, which is more often recommended for blood sugar, but that is also a bitter herb, another example. So bitter herbs work by stimulating the release of the bile. Now, another thing that you have to know to support this process is magnesium. So there's all kinds of different forms of magnesium. There's even magnesium taurate, which is magnesium bound to the amino acid taurine. That could be good if you want to increase your taurine, especially if you're a vegetarian or vegan. And there's magnesium chloride, which is the salt of magnesium. There's magnesium citrate, which is magnesium bound to citric acid. And then there's magnesium sulfate. There's magnesium oxide. All of them have different, qualities. There's magnesium malate. Oh, and that reminds me actually another one, malic acid. Malic acid is specific to dissolving more the calcium stones. And citric acid as well is good at dissolving the calcium stones. So if you have the hard stones in your gallbladder, if you suspect you do, or if you know you do, this is one of the reasons why apple cider vinegar is recommended. This is one of the reasons why lemon juice is recommended. This is one of the reasons why apples are often recommended. One of the reasons, but there's actually several that are quite important when it comes to the liver and detox, because they have these acids which help to break down the stuff that keeps the bile flowing. So, back to the forms of magnesium. So if you need that support, then a citrate or a malate could be good. If you want to get more taurine anyway, then magnesium taurate could be good. Otherwise, a magnesium chloride or a magnesium oxide is good. Oxide is known as being very poorly absorbed, but it does have the benefit of having that laxative effect. My experience and understanding is that either chloride or magnesium sulfate are the best for dilating the bile ducts. So I'll explain that in a second, just to say the downside of sulfate is, if you remember earlier, I said that one of the processes by which your body deals with toxins is sulfation. If you take in a lot of sulfate, including in foods. If you take in foods high in phiols, like famously onions and garlic, they can start moving very toxic toxins that were otherwise in storage, which can make you feel bad. So if you have mercury poisoning, for instance, if you had a lot of mercury in your teeth and it's leaked into your blood, which it doesn't always, but if it has, and then it's been put into storage, the sulfur will get it moving again and make you feel worse. So be careful with sulfur the first time you have it if you're not used to it. So that's often referred to as Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate. Magnesium chloride is often referred to as like magnesium flakes. And so I prefer the magnesium chloride because it's safer. So it dilates the bile ducts. What does that mean? So in order to get the bile flowing, there's a few different things you can do. One of them is dissolve it, get it more liquid again. Another one is to stimulate its release. That's the CCK. But another mechanism you can use is literally, obviously this stuck stuff is being held in all this tubing. You can just expand the tube. And that's what magnesium does. And so by expanding the tube, suddenly the stuff can move. Now, it can move in a bad way. So people sometimes feel worse with large doses of magnesium. As I said, the liver's got all of these kind of, starting with the thinnest, going up to the thickest tubes. And so you can get like a piece of congealed, kind of stuck bile moving, and it can kind of become blocked somewhere else and like cause an issue. And especially if it becomes blocked in the gallbladder, it can cause an issue. Obviously, that could end up being a medical situation, and I cannot give medical advice, but I will tell you anecdotally from my personal experience, if you feel worse because you've got it moving with a magnesium, take more magnesium, because if you dilate it enough, it'll just carry on flowing. That has been my personal experience. Take from that what you will. Can you overdo it with magnesium? Yes. So you've got to be careful, especially if you have kidney disease, because the kidney's got to filter that stuff out. Generally, magnesium fairly safe, though. Your body's good at getting rid of magnesium. That's why most people are deficient in it, unless you have a kidney issue. But again, always talk to your doctor. You might be some medication that stops your body from getting magnesium out efficiently or whatever, and then, you want to be really careful with it. As with everything I'm saying, of course, always. So that, I'd say, are my main ways for step one, to get the stuff moving. Shall I go to step two? Any questions?
No, I think that's pretty good. So we're looking at getting it moving, opening it up. So you referred to the choline, the vitamin C. I think you mentioned the taurine, the magnesium, and TUDCA and bitters and sour things as well.
Yes. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And there's B vitamins a little bit as well, support some of those processes. Everyone should always get B vitamin support in my experience, just even if it's quite a mild B complex, like we sell, or if it's a strong one like someone else sells. We don't do the strong one yet because it's a bit more chance of side effects. But anyway, this mild one is usually very safe, like we have. Anyway, okay, so next phase is stopping it being reabsorbed. And so for that, we use binders. Now, as we said, stopping it reabsorbed, you can just reduce your fat intake. If you can do that, if you feel better with less fat in your diet anyway, make sure you get some, right? So you still need it for essential fats. You still need to, get your essential fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin K, vitamin D. But a lot of people would be okay with less fat. Not everyone. Some people need more fat. It depends. But if you feel, I feel better with less fat anyway, I've been kind of forcing it down, then you can force down less, right? But if high fat is working for you, carry on. More fiber is also tricky. I talked about fiber earlier. So increasing soluble fiber does help to bind that bile to stop it being reabsorbed along the toxicity. But the only issue is increasing soluble fiber makes a lot of people feel worse, unfortunately. This could be for a variety of reasons. The main one that I understand is that soluble fiber also absolutely feeds bacteria. And so if you've got the wrong bacteria, or you've got them in the wrong place, if you've got them in the small intestine, this is why it can make you feel worse. And I read, a whole book on this called The Fiber Menace, and it goes through, study after study. Basically, bottom line is a lot of people don't feel better when they increase their diet. A lot of people feel worse. It's certainly not conclusive that it is beneficial overall, and I think that's the reason for it. So increase soluble fiber if it doesn't cause you a problem. by all means, but you got to be careful with it. And of course, that soluble fiber often comes with other things that may not be beneficial, may just not work for you, right? So, and also, they can create extra gas and all the rest of it. So do with that what you will. You can increase it or not. You can try it and see how it works for you. There are also various fibers that you can buy. The only one I would probably recommend is one called modified citrus pectin, because it has been shown to help the body to bind and display some really difficult toxins to deal with, like heavy metals. There's a few good studies around it being able to do that. There's some indication it even does it not just within the digestive system, but it's absorbed within the bloodstream, but that's not proven. But anyway, that's the only one that I'd recommend. The reason being that it does not feed bacteria. So that is the crucial thing. So it's not going to make any kind of situation worse, as far as I know. But other than that, there's something else I want to recommend. So this is my number one recommendation for binding. And it's something called activated charcoal. So activated charcoal is fascinating. It's something that's been used for literally thousands of years. There's records of it going back all the way to ancient Egypt. They would use that as a form of medicine. It's also something that is in every emergency room because it is such an effective binder of toxicity. It's such an effective binder of toxicity that if you accidentally swallow a large amount of a poison, they will give you charcoal because it will absorb that poison. How does it work? I mean, I won't try and get too technical with it, but in a nutshell, the process of burning wood creates this like honeycomb like effect inside of it, and somehow through some magic that I don't fully understand as well, it is able to attract to it poisons and not nutrients. It's basically down to the electric charge that they have. It attracts things with a positive electrical charge, which despite the name is actually the negative stuff that you don't want. So it attracts the bad stuff because the charge it has on it, and then it will, to some degree, although I think some people overstate this, it will lock it up and keep it safe. Now, there's a limit to that. And so, if you absolutely have a ton of toxicity in there, it may not keep 100% safe. Like it may be, also trailing behind a bit, and because it kind of works like a magnet. As I said, it works on the electrical charge of it. So, if you imagine like a very strong magnet and you imagine a load of pins on the floor, and the pins, as I said, is quite a good analogy for toxin, given the root of the word. Then it's like dragging the magnet along the pins. You'll pick up a lot of them. Maybe occasionally you'll lose one again, So it's not a perfect way of doing it, but compared to almost everything else, it is almost perfect because it's still a magnet holding on to them, right? Whereas everything else pretty much, and as I said, including a lot of the nutritional stuff people talk about, it's just moving the toxicity around. And often it ends up somewhere that is even worse, that you really don't want it to be, Or as we said, and that's kind of within the bloodstream and stuff. But as we said, within the digestive tract, it will often be moved from the liver where you don't want it, but it's relatively safe, into the bloodstream or into the small intestine where it's going to make you feel worse. So although it's not perfect at that containment job, it's pretty much the best thing that we have. It's extremely safe. There are studies showing people using dosages so much higher than I would ever do or recommend that are absolutely fine. It's like zero toxicity to it, again, because it's anti-toxic. Now, the only downside to it really is that it's drying. And so you do need to have more water while you have it. And if you have it in excess, you will be constipated. Now, if you were paying attention earlier, you'll know that if you're constipated, the bile probably isn't flowing. If you have a large amount of bile flowing, you won't be constipated. So if you have a large amount of bile flowing, then you can have more charcoal, and you need it if the bile is toxic, which it usually is in our modern day and age. If the bile is not flowing, then you're already constipated compared to optimal, and you don't need as much charcoal because it's not flowing anyway. Now, there's still some toxicity in the food you eat, the water you drink, so there's still some benefit in having the charcoal on an ongoing basis, I believe, and have experience of, but you would not have as much if there's no bile flowing. And so therefore, so basically have a level that does not cause constipation or more constipation is the simple amount. So when it comes to dosages, I can't recommend how much. That's really the amount. If you can have, I don't know, a tablespoon 2 or 3 times a day and you go from having diarrhea to being normal, then that's a good amount. If you could only have like a pinch or an eighth of a teaspoon or something like that once a day, and that's an amount that keeps you going the same as before and doesn't make you more constipated, then that's the right amount. You have to really base it on that more than anything, I would say. Obviously, if you have digestive discomfort, if you have indigestion, if you have belching, if you have any of that kind of stuff, can it help with that? Absolutely. You know, if it can help with someone who's been poisoned and might die, it can help with your very minor poisoning, right? Because that's what that stuff is. The burping and the acid reflux and all that kind of stuff. That's all, it's poison. It may be poison caused by all the stuff we talked about, or it may be poison caused by an organism, right? Like H. pylori or whatever, right? But it's some kind of poison, whether it's endotoxin, which is created by bacteria, whether it's mercury, whether it's mycotoxin, whether it's whatever. So the biggest objection that I hear to people taking activated charcoal, other than what I just said about it constipates me, is that oh, but I don't want it absorbing nutrients. And this is because there's a warning on there, and it's the warning that should be on there, saying don't take it like near medication. But you got to remember, a lot of medications we would class as poisons. They're kind of necessary poisons. This is this thing called hormesis, where a certain degree of challenge to your body is actually beneficial. Like exercise is a challenge to your body, but it's beneficial. Cold is a challenge to your body, but it's beneficial. So there are compounds which are poisonous, but in a small dose, they help us. But nutrients, like things that you actually need, there is no evidence that activated charcoal absorbs nutrients. And there is loads of evidence, any essential nutrients, and there is loads of evidence that it does not. I'll tell you from my personal experience, I feel 100% that this is the case. I've been underweight all my life. We talked about this a lot in the underweight episode, so I won't repeat it in any detail. I started taking charcoal after every meal as a binder because it's part of a typical mycotoxin detox protocol. This is really where I've got this from. I'm not claiming I've invented it. I just realized it helps with all the other toxins as well, not just the mycotoxins. But yeah, so I was doing it for that reason, because I'd be diagnosed with it. I had a test proving that I had it, whatever. So I'm doing it, and I'm like 70 kilos. It improves my digestion. It actually makes me more hungry, because the thing that was stopping me being hungry, it turns out, or one of the main things, is the toxins. Right? You feel poison enough, you're not hungry anymore. So the charcoal comes in, mops up the toxins, I'm hungry more quickly. So I'm able to eat more, which means I'm able to absorb more nutrients. So I went from being 70 kilos and quite nutritionally deficient in quite a few nutrients, according to thorough testing, to 2 years later, having almost no nutritional deficiencies of amino acids, vitamins, minerals, you name it, essential fats, all good. And weighing, currently more like 85, 86 kilos, something like that. So without any fat, or without any significant fat, I don't know. My waist is the same size, put it that way. So what does that tell you? I mean, I know it's anecdotal, but it tells me, if nothing else, let's not generalize, it tells me it is possible to take a large amount of charcoal over a long period of time and have more nutrient absorption and more digestion of foods, right? Because how else would I have got the results? Is it guaranteed? That you could say is not proven because it's anecdotal, but at least it shows it's possible. And again, as I say, there are many studies showing that activated charcoal does not interfere with any nutrient that you actually need. You do need to take it away from medications, so do that. Here's how I like to do it. I like to do it the first liquid I drink after every meal. Now, you probably know, we talked about in the digestive episode, you should drink liquid at least 2 hours, preferably 2.5 hours after a meal. Now, when I say meal, I mean meal. I do not believe in snacking. I don't think it's great. One of the things that confuses the digestive system. I have people argue about that. They're like, oh, but many animals are grazing all day. Sure. But I say, yeah, but sharks eat like 3 times a year. You're not a cow and you're not a shark. You're somewhere in between. And the in-between that you are is, a meal several times a day is optimal. But whatever. So I'd say about 2.5 hours optimally after a meal, I drink water with some charcoal in. Again, some, right? Could be a pinch, could be a tablespoon. I'll leave that up to your experience. Then I'll drink whatever other water or tea or whatever else you want to do. But I have that first. The benefit of that is that any toxicity in the food I've just eaten, any toxicity in the bile that was released because of the food I just eaten, and any toxicity that was created by the organisms in my digestive tract that have just eaten what I just eaten, pathogenic or even just relatively harmless organisms, but they eat the fiber and they create a lot of gas. All of that gets absorbed by the activated charcoal. Now you may say, okay, well, if it's so beneficial for that, why not just have it sooner? So there's, the reason why you shouldn't drink anything, I said water earlier, but you shouldn't have tea, coffee, alcohol, anything just after a meal, is because it dilutes the digestive juices. If you're going to have anything with a meal or after a meal, it's better if it's got acid in, so it dilutes the acid less, right? So if you must have water with a meal, it's better if it's, got a decent bit of lemon juice in it or something like that. Or if it's, kombucha or something like that, right? Something that's quite acidic. But so my theory on this, I haven't seen this proven, is that the charcoal does soak up the acid in the stomach. So what I found is if people have charcoal with the meal, it's not optimal for digestion. But I don't think it's a major big deal, but I think it's for the same reason it's not optimal to drink water with a meal, because it's just diluting that digestive process. So that's why I prefer to have the charcoal in between meals. Not because I think it's going to block the nutrients per se, but because it's blocking the other digestive juices. It's getting in the way of the other digestive juices. After about 2.5 hours, all of your stomach should be empty. And, all of it should be in the intestine by then. And that is where it's then safe to add the charcoal. So that's the way I like to do it. I like to do it after every meal. And so, because I eat 3 meals a day, that's basically twice a day. Sorry. I tend to not do it after my last meal, but that's my own personal thing. So I do it twice a day, not after every meal, technically. But that's up to you again. Chrissy, as you said when we talked about it, personally, you said, if I eat dinner at 6 and I go to bed at 8 or something, I haven't had a chance yet, right? So something like that. So that's the same reason that I don't do it, although I go to bed later than you. It's the same thing. I eat too close to going to bed. But other than that, yeah, between every meal. I love charcoal. It's an amazing thing. Again, it's hard to believe until you've experienced it. So I understand if you're a little bit skeptical. Make sure we'll include links to a lot of the research studies underneath, Chrissy, that prove just how beneficial this is. It's interesting for me to think that if you think about forest fires, right? It's so devastating. It kills so many animals, so many plants. It seems like a terrible thing, and you're like, well, why would nature do that? Why would nature just regularly destroy and burn down these forests? But the interesting thing is when it does that, one of the things it leaves behind is charcoal. And charcoal is miraculous for detoxification. I literally put it in the same class as water. Like, in order to cleanse, there's water and there's charcoal, which is like fire and water, back to the ancient elements. Like, it's absolutely essential. To me, not having charcoal these days is like not drinking water. Sure, people do it, but it's not a great idea. It's right in that category. There's
a couple of things, because I know we're coming up to time, but we have talked about in the past, or I've seen as well, and I think we've talked about this, is that there's a couple different types of charcoal. Can you speak to the couple different types of charcoal? And also, when you and I have had a discussion before, you were talking about the honeycomb structure. And one other final thing where we talked about the longevity aspect of charcoal and what that can bring. There was a study that you'd shared with me about the mice and whether it was calorie deficit or whether it was something else. So on those three things, if you can tie that all in somehow, that would be great.
Well, yeah, let's answer the first one first. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's actually one of the things, the mold detox was not enough to persuade me to do it regularly, because it's weird. This is the one other thing about it. Like, it's a gritty powder. Now, can you just take it in capsules? Maybe that's what you meant by your first point. Yes, you absolutely can. It's just more expensive. So if you're trying to save money, it's not the best way of doing it. But yeah, you can absolutely take capsules. It works just fine.
I was speaking to, there's the coconut charcoal versus the hardwood.
Okay. All right, I'll get to that in a sec. Yes. That wasn't enough to convince me. But then I was looking up, because I get asked to formulate products. So I was asked to formulate an anti-aging product, and I was looking at anti-aging nutrients that had proven scientific research. I actually didn't think there were any, because I had a lot of people make that assertion that there's nothing that's been proven that if you take it, it will extend lifespan. But I was interested, first of all, to find that's not true. But second of all, to find that one of the few on the list of things that have been shown to increase lifespan was charcoal. And it's so interesting. But then, of course, in light of what I've shared in this episode, it totally makes sense, right? If it's absorbing the thing that we're postulating damages the DNA, which causes all the problems that also age us, then of course it would extend lifespan, right? So yeah, absolutely. And there's mouse and rat studies that confirm that. Again, it's hard to do in a human, right? Humans live so long, it would take a hell of a long time. Longevity studies in humans don't tend to work very well, because controlling the variables as well, right? You can easily control what a rat and mouse are doing, not so much for a human. Anyway. The types. So there's generally the two types sold: a hardwood or coconut. Coconut is far more common. It's usually cheaper, I guess, depending on the brand. There's nothing wrong with coconut. It works great. Probably the type they use in the hospitals is coconut. Hardwood is not really superior, except for in one way that I found, and that's just that it's easier to clean. So the charcoal one, the coconut one tends to be more fine, and I guess that means it sticks to things more easily. And the hardwood one does not. And even just in terms of practicalities, I always just save big I save big jars when we buy stuff, and I just reuse those over and again. But it can stain the glass. So, if your wife or husband has very fancy glasses, don't accidentally use them. It might annoy them. Just use something, reusable and that you don't mind if it gets stained. And then, the hardwood type is less staining.
Wonderful, Elwin. So from here, can you now take us through step 3?
So step 3 is simple compared to the other two. So step 3 is just go to the toilet. I know it sounds silly, but people kind of resist doing it for various reasons, right? They're out, they don't want to use the public toilet, people just resist it for psychological reasons, I find. They don't enjoy the process and they want to wait as long as possible. That's not helping this process, right? I'm not saying you should take laxatives. I've already talked about magnesium, I've already talked about bitters. I mean, those both are laxatives, but I'm not recommending them for that reason precisely, right? I'm recommending them for bile flow. But basically, the longer you hold on to it, I mean, the charcoal is going to do a lot to hold on to it. But even as I said, it's a powerful magnet, but it's not foolproof. It's a powerful magnet, and it's got this honeycomb structure that will hold a lot. But still, eventually it gets full, eventually it gets saturated. It's not going to hold everything. And so you're still going to have a lot of bile, you're still going to have a lot of toxicity. And the longer you wait to get it out beyond what your body wants, the more will be reabsorbed. So as soon as you feel the inkling that you need to go to the toilet, go to the toilet. I know this sounds stupid. Even I do it, right? I mean, I'm not doing it. I don't think I've done it with video recording before, but let's face it. I've never said to you, Chrissy, sorry, we're going to have to stop recording. I've got to go. Like, I would probably hold it in that context. So I get it. Everyone has a context that they would hold it, right? But I'm saying try and absolutely minimize that, right? Whenever you can, just make your excuses, and go to the toilet. And for God's sake, don't hold on to it because you don't enjoy the experience, whatever. If you have that experience, go to a Freudian therapist and they'll help you work through it. Like, I'm not saying I love going to the toilet. I'm not saying that, some people it's the highlight of their day, right? That's fine too, but I'm not saying you want to turn it into that. It's just something that needs to be done. And the longer you leave it, the more toxicity is building up. That's all.
Yeah, that's a very simple part for step number 3. But you're absolutely right. Resisting that urge, then it's the body is just stopping everything up. And it makes sense that at that point, when it's there, it's just going to continue. It's at cross purposes because we're trying to get things out instead of holding things in.
Yep. And for me, it's like sometimes it's just I don't realize. Like, after having a few years without bile flow, like I said, and then I'm like, oh, wait, do I need to go to the toilet? And I go, oh, yeah, wow, look at that. So it's like, even if you're not sure, just try it, just in case.
Wonderful, Elwin. And I know this has been a big overview of detoxification in and of itself, really speaking to the different phases. And I'm sure we've got some more episodes scheduled where we're going to get into specifics, correct? That we'll do a few more on that, which we can open up, because detoxification, as I'm discovering, is a very, very big subject. So I just want to say
very important.
Yeah.
But I will say, yes, I want to get into specifics. I want to get more into phase 1 and phase 2 in specific cases, right? Where it is a good idea, where it's not a good idea, what it can help, and all the rest of it. And I want to talk about specific toxins. I think we'll probably do it that way. So maybe we'll do one on heavy metals, one on mycotoxins, one on my favorite toxin, which I've not revealed yet in these public recordings that I'm working on personally myself right now. I guess one more thing I would just want to bring up before we close, and I know you normally ask me that, Chrissy, is testing. So the biggest breakthrough I had in that issue, I talked about toxic bile theory and stuff like that, but the biggest breakthrough for me was doing the very, very comprehensive general test, the NutrEval, and seeing that my lead was sky high, right? And doing that was like, I really do have a toxicity issue. Sure enough, I went to my GP afterwards, the general practitioner, doctor. I go, could this be causing all my symptoms? He goes, could be. Like, no help offered, It's just like, we'll retest you in a year. But I mean, it wasn't like, anything's possible could be. It was like, yeah, it might well be, right? That could be it. But I don't know anything about it. It's not often doctors admit that, but he did. And I don't know how to help you, and you're not quite at the level where you're hospitalized. So we'll retest you again and try not to be in contact with it. So that was super helpful. Getting the mycotoxin thing to some degree. The mycotoxin was like definitely there, but the lead, it was just so incredibly high that was like, oh, well, no wonder I don't feel great then, So finding the specific toxins and working on the specific toxins is really great. But everything that I've just said will help in general, right? And I don't think there's any type of toxicity that what I've just said won't be helpful for. That's the good news. Is it a good idea to test? Is it a good idea to find out exactly what you're dealing with? Is it a good idea to target it specifically? Yes. But no matter what, like, maybe I'll end up giving this to clients and saying, here's all my specific advice for your situation, and then here's the thing that everyone has to do, right? And that's this episode. Like, everyone needs to do the supporting of the phase 3 of the detoxification process. Is absolutely crucial for everyone.
Perfect. Thank you for those final thoughts. But just want to say again, as always, really appreciate what you're sharing here. It's valuable information that, especially on this platform where we're empowering people for their, optimal health and well living and vitality, it's essential. In my eyes, it's essential to move forward in that way. So as always, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We do appreciate you. Please, if you have questions, put them in the comments section. We love hearing that, and will help us bring more episodes to you that you really want to hear and you really want us to delve deeper into. So please, again, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, and we will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, I want to tell you about a way that you can support the podcast while also getting great deals on high quality supplements that Elwin and I personally use, and that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is that they have great quality products with minimal fillers at a very affordable price. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in my experience, they're very helpful and friendly. And the thing I love most of all is the amazing descriptions that Elwin has written about each product category on that topic. And each product has so much education on it that I've actually learned more from reading the descriptions than I have from a lot of articles. So to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, use promo code RejuvenateMe for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order using promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.